The first child came out of the smoke carrying a chicken under one arm and a Bible bigger than her chest. On the porch behind her, a woman with ash in her hair held off 3 men with a split-handled shovel while the orphan house burned around them. Part of the roof had already sunk. The air smelled of wet timber, lamp oil, and fear. When a freight wagon came rattling into the yard, she did not plead. She pointed at the little girl and said, "Take the children first." The cowboy on the wagon bench hauled back on the reins. The team stamped and snorted, leather groaning. He took in the fire, the men, the row of terrified faces at the broken window, and the paper nailed to the fence post with a butcher knife. Condemned by order of Elias Rourke. He looked at the woman. "You running this place?" "I'm keeping them alive," she said. "And I won't leave without the children." One of the men laughed. "Order says those brats are county property till morning." The cowboy climbed down slow, like a man who had learned haste could get a person buried. "Property's still breathing," he said. "Ain't your concern." The cowboy glanced at the small farm wagon hitched behind him, then at the window where more little faces pressed through smoke. "Seems it is now. Before we go further, tell us in the comments where you're listening from tonight. We like knowing who's riding with us before the road turns dark." The first man rushed him and went down in the mud before he understood he had been handled. The second reached for a revolver and lost it to a twist of the wrist that looked almost gentle. The third thought better of things altogether. The woman did not waste breath thanking him. She shoved a towhead boy toward him instead. "Lift him. He favors his left leg when he's frightened." He took the boy, surprised into obedience. From inside came coughing, crying, and the crack of another beam giving way. The woman ran into the smoke. She returned with 2 little girls, then a baby wrapped in a blanket, then another child hardly older than 5. Soot blackened her throat. One sleeve had burned through. "How many?" he asked. 9 with the baby. 10 with me." He measured the wagon with one look. "This one won't carry all that safe." Her gray eyes met his without blinking. Flames reflected in them like hard stars. "Then bring out a bigger wagon." One of the men in the mud barked a laugh. The cowboy did not. He looked past the yard to the freight lot at the far end of town and back again. "Can you hold this place 10 minutes?" he asked. "I can keep them alive 10 minutes." He ran. By the time he came back with the biggest freight wagon in Bitter Creek and a fresh pair of draft mares, the whole town was drifting toward the fire with buckets and lanterns. Ada already had the children in a line, oldest carrying youngest, smallest gripping coat hems and apron strings. Freight men lived by details. Wyatt noticed the oldest girl sweeping her braid over one shoulder each time fear rose, and the thin boy standing between the little ones and the crowd as if he could block the world with his ribs. Something shifted in his chest he had spent years keeping still. Her name reached him from that little girl with the chicken. "Miss Ada doesn't lie," she whispered when he lifted her into the wagon. "Even when it'd help." "That's so." The girl nodded solemnly. "That's how we know what she says matters." Then another voice came through the smoke. Smooth, unhurried, certain of being obeyed. "Well, this has grown public." Elias Rourke rode through the gate on a black gelding, coat clean despite the ash in the air. He was younger than the town's fear of him, broad-shouldered, handsome in the cold way a knife is handsome. He took in the loaded wagon, the watching townsfolk, and Ada Mercer standing with a shovel like a boundary post. "Miss Mercer," he said, "you do have a flair for spectacle. You nailed a death notice to a house full of children," she said. People came of their own accord. A murmur moved through the crowd. Rourke's gaze shifted to the cowboy. Recognition flickered. "Wyatt Vale. I had heard you were hauling freight now. I suppose disappointment sits lighter if a man learns to carry it for hire." Wyatt kept lifting children. "Plain speaking would sit lighter too. You should try it." Rourke smiled without warmth. 2 questions hung over the yard. Why was the richest man in Bitter Creek so eager to burn an orphan house before morning? And why did Wyatt Vale look at him as if he had been waiting for this without knowing it? Ada climbed onto the bigger wagon with the baby in one arm and the Bible tucked under the other. Flames punched through the orphan house roof behind her. Rourke raised a pale-gloved hand. "That land belongs to me now," he said. "If you remove those minors before county transfer, I will have you charged with abduction. Any man helping you will hang his own name beside yours." The crowd recoiled. A legal threat frightened decent people more than fire ever did. Ada went very still. Wyatt could see the numbers moving behind her eyes. If she stayed, the children would be taken. If she ran, she might lose them forever under the law. The easy path stood right in front of her. She gathered the baby closer and said, quietly and clearly, "Drive." Wyatt snapped the reins, and the wagon lurched through the gate toward the church at the edge of town. Ada made him stop at the church instead of bolting for the county road. Women were waiting with quilts, bread, and water as if the fire had wrung them out of their kitchens and strayed into courage. Widow Sutter brought salt pork and rolls. Mrs. Keene brought lamp oil and flannel. Leon Pike, the one-eyed blacksmith, came with a sound wool pin and water skins. Nobody asked whether Ada was in charge. They only moved when she spoke. Smallest by the stove. Oldest on the wall. Shoes stay on. Thomas, count heads with me. Mary Ellen, tear those blankets into strips. June, if that chicken keeps you from crying, bring it. She said it all in one breath, and somehow the room steadied around her. Wyatt saw then that her skill was not merely keeping children fed. She could gather fear by the handful and stack it into order before it drowned anybody. When the children were settled, she went to the front pew and drew out a packet wrapped in oilcloth. She had hidden it there long before the fire began. "That's what he wants," she said when Wyatt asked. Reverend Cobb hurried in a moment later, carrying the county register under one arm. He was red-faced from the run. "Miss Mercer, the copied record of your trust is gone. 3 pages cut clean out." Ada untied the packet and showed Wyatt an original deed, a journal in her father's hand, and a sealed letter browned at the folds. "My father founded the home," she said. "The building, the lower meadow, the spring pasture, and the water rights all belong to the children. Rourke has been buying dry land all winter. If he gets that spring, he controls the valley by August. Judge Bell wrote before he died that the children cannot be transferred unless they're presented before the territorial bench at Red Willow with proof the trust failed lawfully. So Rourke means to burn the home and call the trust dead with it." Wyatt said, "How far to Red Willow?" 2 days in a clear wagon. 3 with children. Longer if the law rides against us." Leon Pike looked through the church window. "Then you won't make the South Bridge. Rourke's already posting riders." Wyatt knew another route. A bad one. The old logging trail through Cedar Notch climbed high, ran narrow, and crossed a half-rotten bridge at Washburn Ridge. Taking it would tie his fate to Ada's in a way no careful man could later untangle. He had spent 3 quiet years saving for a mule team and a patch of land. Trouble had no place in that plan. He looked toward the children. Benji pointed helpers toward those who needed them most. June fed crumbs to the chicken because it was easier than showing her shaking hands. Thomas kept watch in his socks and did not complain. Ada caught Wyatt measuring the road in his head. "You know a way. I know a worse way. Will it hold us? If the axle behaves, if the team doesn't bolt, and if nobody mistakes fear for surrender." She nodded once. "That's more hope than the main road offers." Then Sheriff Dodd filled the doorway with 4 men and a paper in his hand. He had the damp face of a man who sweated at the edge of truth. "By county order, the miners in this church are to be surrendered at first light," he announced. "Miss Mercer, if you leave Bitter Creek with them, I will be bound to name you an abductor. Any man assisting you will be charged accordingly." Nobody spoke. Ada stepped toward him. "Do you know what Benji does when thunder starts?" The sheriff blinked. "What?" "He gathers all the shoes to one corner so no one has to search in the dark. Mary Ellen lies about being hungry, so the little ones take the larger biscuits. June talks to frightened animals. Thomas sleeps in his clothes because he thinks readiness is safety. If you call that a bundle of miners, then you are poorer than I judged you." The sheriff's ears went red. Ada's voice lowered. "I will not stay for a peaceful theft." Wyatt heard himself add, "If a thing has to be stolen in the dark, Sheriff, it usually doesn't belong to the thief." Dodd swallowed and said, "Riders are already posted at the South Bridge and Telegraph Road. God help you if you run." "Thank you," Wyatt said. "For what?" "For telling us where not to go." The sheriff left with his dignity dragging behind him. Outside, while Wyatt harnessed the new team, Ada came to him with the oilcloth packet tucked beneath her coat. The church bell overhead ticked softly as it cooled. "You can still turn back," she said. "You owe us nothing." He checked a strap that did not need checking. "Most of the worst things I've done started with me saying that exact sentence to myself." When she waited, he told the truth. Years earlier, he had driven payroll for a cattle outfit Rourke financed. In a blizzard, they passed a broken settler wagon with a woman and 2 boys freezing beside it. His foreman said if they stopped, 50 men would go hungry. Wyatt kept driving. They found them in the thaw, he said. I have not slept one whole night since. Ada stood quiet long enough for the leather creak under his hands to sound loud. Then she said, almost gently, "You've been standing in that road ever since." It landed harder than blame would have. So yes, he said, I could leave. Seems I've had practice. Not tonight, she answered. That was the moment he chose the harder thing. Not because it was noble, but because one failure in a lifetime was enough. When the wagon was packed, June leaned over the sideboard and asked, Mr. Vale, will the stars know where we're going? He glanced at the cold scatter above the steeple. They've known longer than we have. At the fork outside town, he turned west into the dark timber instead of south toward the bridge. If you were in their place, would you trust a man carrying that much guilt if he were the only road left open? Tell us below. The old logging trail climbed through cedar and shale, the wagon jolting so hard the children slept only in scraps. Ada never slept. Every few minutes, she reached back to touch a blanket or a forehead, as if counting them was the only way to keep the night from stealing one. Wyatt drove by memory and knew by the second hour that they were being followed. Hoofbeats carried far in cold timber. How many? Ada whispered. Too many to welcome. At Washburn Ridge, he ordered everyone over 12 out of the wagon. No one argued. The trail narrowed to a shelf of dirt with rock on one side and black emptiness on the other. The bridge beyond was little more than old planks over a rain-carved gap. A rifle cracked behind them. Stone spat near Wyatt's boot. The team screamed and surged sideways. The wagon lurched toward the drop. Ada thrust the baby at Mary Ellen and sprang for the lead mare's head. She laid both hands against the animal's face and spoke in that same quiet voice June used with the chicken. Easy, Queenie. Easy, girl. I'm right here. The mare shuddered, rolled one wild eye, and held. Another shot. Then another. Move the children. Wyatt shouted. They ran low along the shelf. Ada stayed with the team until the last child passed, then shoved 3 feed sacks into the trail behind them so any rider coming fast in the dark would lose footing. They reached the bridge just as Rourke's riders burst from the trees. Children first, then Ada, then Thomas and Mary Ellen carrying Benji between them. The team last. Rourke himself reined up at the far side, calm as Sunday. Stop there, he called. You are making criminals of yourselves for children who won't remember your names. They already know them better than you do, Ada said. Wyatt slapped the team on. A bullet struck the trace. Leather snapped. One mare reared. The wagon twisted. Wills climbed the rail. Ada caught the sideboard. Wyatt lunged for the bridle. For a heartbeat, the whole world balanced on rotten timber. Then the rear wheel broke through. Wood exploded. Children screamed. Wyatt caught Ada's wrist with one hand and the broken rail with the other. The bridge buckled under them. He looked up once, saw the riders coming, saw the boards failing, saw no road that kept everyone safe. Take them across, he shouted. Not without you. You don't get both. He cut the last good trace. The freed team lunged forward. The wagon jerked just enough to throw Ada towards solid ground. The bridge vanished beneath Wyatt, and he dropped with the broken wheel into the black river below. Ada did not cry out until he was gone. By dawn she had the children to Miller's Hollow, where Rudhan Cole's sheep camp sat under a line of cottonwoods by the creek. Rudhan was a broad, taciturn man who asked no questions until he had put hot broth into every child and wrapped Benji's leg in splints. Ada stood in the camp doorway in Wyatt's coat, listening to the creek outside. She knew the practical choice now. Keep the children hidden, keep moving, let the river hold what it had taken. Then Thomas came running from the bank. Miss Ada, there's a man caught in the willow roots. They dragged Wyatt out half-drowned and bleeding from a gash above the ribs where the wheel iron had torn him. He coughed river water and tried to stand before sense returned to him. Ada pushed him back down on a wool blanket so firmly that even Rudhan looked impressed. When she cleaned the wound, Wyatt watched her capable hands. They trembled only once when the cloth came away red. I thought you'd be halfway to Red Willow by now, he said. And leave you in the creek to improve the scenery? Would have saved trouble. She tied off the bandage. No, it would have repeated it. He knew what she meant. The road, the blizzard, the choice that had made a home in his chest and never paid rent. By evening, the children were asleep in the shearing shed under wool blankets that smelled of lanolin and cedar smoke. A kettle muttered on the stove. Outside, sheep bells knocked faintly in the dark. Ada sat by Wyatt with the oilcloth packet in her lap. For the first time since he had seen her, she looked tired enough to break. "My husband died 3 winters ago," she said. "Not in some noble fashion. A fever. Quick and small and mean. We had one boy, Samuel. He lasted 5 days after his father. After that, every kindness sounded to me like a thing that would ask for payment later. So I took the orphan house because children needed feeding whether I believed in tomorrow or not." Wyatt kept still. She traced the edge of Judge Bell's letter with one finger. "I stopped expecting anyone to stay. That way, when they left, I did not have to call it loss." He looked at the bandage over his ribs. "And yet you came back to the river. Children watch what we do with the wounded," she said. "It teaches them what kind of world they're living in." Silence sat between them, warm as the stove. At length Wyatt said, "I leave before I can be missed. Been doing it so long I almost called it character." Ada's mouth softened. "A habit isn't the same as a soul, Wyatt." That was the line that would have been painted on a barn wall if anyone there had thought to carry paint. He let out a breath that sounded almost like surrender. She opened the packet then. Inside the journal, tucked between lists of feed and weather, her father had kept copies of every agreement tied to the trust. One newer page showed Elias Rourke's offer to buy the land outright, refused and witnessed. On the back, Reverend Mercer had written a warning. "If harm comes to this house, look first to the man who cannot bear to remember he began in it." Ada stared. "Rourke's mother lived at the orphan house after her husband left," she said. "Elias was a child in those rooms. My father taught him his letters. He was ashamed of it all his life." Wyatt thought of the polished horse, the pale gloves, the hunger in the man's face whenever he looked at land. "So he means to own the place that once pitted him." "No," Ada said. "He means to erase the place that witnessed him small." That truth explained more than greed, and none of it softened him. Benji, who had not been as asleep as anyone hoped, spoke from his blanket nest by the wall. "Miss Ada?" "Yes, love." "If a place loved you when you were little, why would you burn it?" No one answered for a long moment. Finally, Ada said, "Because some people would rather destroy a mirror than see themselves honestly. If this story is moving you, you are exactly who we wrote it for." A like and a subscribe tell us to keep making room for the quiet hearts that know what it costs to stay kind. At first light, Danger came back wearing polished boots. Rourke rode into Miller's Hollow with 3 men, Sheriff Dodd, and a folded paper held high. He did not bother pretending outrage now. "Territorial writ," he called. "Hand over the children and the drifter, and I may choose not to press the hanging charge to its end." Ada stepped into the yard before anyone else could. The morning smelled of wet wool and coffee grounds. Behind her, the children gathered in the shed doorway, pale but upright. "You burned their home," she said. "You forged your order. You cut pages from the county record." Rourke smiled. "Can you prove any of that with tears and moral posture?" Wyatt rose from the doorway, one hand pressed to his bandage. Rourke's eyes narrowed. He had not expected the river to fail him. "Still alive," Rourke said. "You do make a habit of inconveniencing better men." Wyatt answered, "A better man wouldn't be here." Rourke's gaze shifted to the oilcloth packet under Ada's arm. "There's the heart of it. Give me the deed, and I will see the children placed in respectable homes. Keep it, and I'll scatter them so far apart they will forget one another by autumn." A visible shiver ran through Mary Ellen. Thomas clenched his jaw until it shook. Ada could have bought safety for Wyatt. She could have taken the bargain good people are always offered by the wicked. Surrender what is sacred, and we will call the damage mercy. Instead, she said, "Children are not chips in a card game, Mr. Rourke." His expression cooled. "Then you force my hand." That was when June stepped out of the shed with the chicken under one arm and the big Bible under the other. "Mr. Rourke," she said in her piping voice, "you dropped your case." Every eye moved. Half hidden beside his saddle hung a dispatch satchel. Wyatt saw at once what it meant. Men like Rourke kept power in paper as much as in pistols. He met Ada's eyes. She understood in the same instant. Then everything happened at once. Ada whistled sharp. The sheepdog sprang from under Ruthan's wagon. Ruthan flung open the pen gate. A river of wool burst into the yard, bells clanging and dust rising. Dodd's mount reared. One rider went sideways. June loosed the chicken, which flew straight at Rourke's face in a storm of feathers. Wyatt moved through the chaos like a man stepping back into a language he had once sworn off. He did not shoot. He went low, caught Rourke's boot, and dragged him clean out of the saddle into the mud. Ada was already there, ripping the satchel free while Thomas and Mary Ellen drove the younger children behind the water trough. Rourke slammed Wyatt against the wagon wheel, reopening the wound. Wyatt hit back with the full weight of years spent calling restraint a virtue when really it had been fear. The sheriff tried to level his pistol. Benji hurled a tin dipper at his wrist. The shot went wild. Ruthan knocked Dodd flat with a fence rail. Ada ran for the shed with the satchel. One of Rourke's men caught her shawl. She turned, drove the heavy Bible into his nose, and kept moving. By the time Rourke staggered after her, Wyatt was between them. They faced each other in the wool yard while sheep streamed around their boots and the dogs snapped at frightened horses. Rourke wiped mud from his mouth. "You think one satchel undoes me?" Wyatt's breath came short from the torn wound, but his voice held. "No, I think truth does. Satchel just helps it travel." Rourke lunged for his gun. Wyatt was faster. He kicked the pistol into the trough, drove Rourke back against the shearing post, and pinned him there. He could have killed him. Instead, he looked at Ada standing in the shed doorway with the children behind her and chose the man he wanted them to remember. He stepped back, leaving Rourke choking on mud and failure. In the satchel, they found more than enough. Duplicate transfer contracts with the children's names. A forged county seal stamp wrapped in linen. Notes to Sheriff Dodd promising payment once the spring pasture changed hands. And a private agreement with a cattle syndicate in Cheyenne, valuing the water rights higher than every room in the orphan house put together. By noon, they were on the road to Red Willow in Ruthan's spring wagon, Rourke and Dodd riding behind under Leon Pike's borrowed shotgun and the disgust of every honest person who had seen the yard at Miller's Hollow. The hearing at Red Willow was held in a square brick building smelling of ink and dust. Rourke arrived washed and lawyered. Ada arrived in a smoke-stained dress with 9 children, 1 baby, a Bible, an oilcloth packet, and a satchel full of his own handwriting. He thought appearance would save him. He had mistaken tenderness for softness. When Judge Harlan asked who spoke for the miners of Mercer House, Ada rose. She stood with the steadiness of a fence post and began not with law, but with names. Thomas Reed, age 12. Mary Ellen Pike, age 13. June Holloway, age 8. Benjamin Cross, age 7. Clara and Nell Sutter, 5 and 4. Ruthie Bell, 3. Samuel, no last name, 9 months. And 1 child buried behind the old cottonwood, whose grave Mr. Rourke hoped to plow under when he took the meadow. The courtroom went still. Then she laid out the deed, Judge Bell's letter, Reverend Mercer's journal, the refused purchase offer, the forged seal from Rourke's satchel, the illegal transfer contracts, and the payment notes to Dodd. She spoke clearly, with dates and boundary lines, and the kind of unornamented precision that makes liars sweat through their collars. When Rourke's lawyer tried to interrupt, she held up the big Bible June had rescued from the fire. Inside its back cover, Reverend Mercer had written every child received into the home, every donation promised to the trust, and the original witness lines for the spring pasture grant, because he had not trusted the county clerk even then. "You may burn a building," Ada said, "but some men have the sense to keep truth in more than one place." Judge Harlan examined the forged seal, the signatures, the bribe notes, and Rourke's own contract valuing the water rights. By the time Wyatt testified to the fire and the assault at Miller's Hollow, the room had already turned. Rourke made one last mistake. He called the children Freight. June stood up on the courtroom bench, chin shaking, and said, "Freight don't cry for each other in the night." Nobody forgot that line. Judge Harlan did not take long after that. He voided the transfer orders, restored the full trust, named Ada Mercer legal guardian and trustee, and ordered an immediate criminal inquiry into arson, fraud, attempted kidnapping, and conspiracy. The spring pasture, lower meadow, and water rights remained with the children. The cattle syndicate withdrew before sunset. By week's end, Rourke had lost the water deal and the mortgages built on it. He did not go down grandly. He went down arguing while the marshal took his belt and dignity together. Sheriff Dodd resigned before he could be thrown out, which did not save him from trial. The valley changed quickly. Widow Sutter organized a rebuilding supper. Leon Pike offered timber at cost. Mrs. Keene sent cloth. Rudhan donated lambing money. Even men who had stood silent at the fire came with hammers. Wyatt meant to leave once the first frame of the new house stood. He had a habit of going the moment a place began to feel like it could miss him. He had the wagon loaded by dawn when he found Ada sitting on the unfinished porch with the baby in her lap and Benji's tin cup between her palms. Sawdust scented the air. Somewhere inside, June was singing to the chicken. "You're leaving before breakfast," Ada said. That was the notion. He looked out at the meadow where the children would soon run, and the spring that had nearly cost them everything. "I've spent years mistaking departure for discipline." She only asked, "And what do you call it now?" He set the wagon brake and walked to the porch. Cowardice, when it's fear dressed up in good manners. Ada's mouth shifted, not quite a smile, and far more dear for it. She handed him Benji's tin cup. "Then stay long enough to learn who takes carrots mashed and who takes them whole," she said. He laughed, quiet and helpless. "That's a mighty serious invitation." "It is." So he stayed. First for the roofing, then for the fencing, then because Thomas asked if a man could learn tracking from someone who read mud like a letter, then because Mary Ellen started saving the best biscuit corners for him without announcing it, then because June stopped asking if the stars knew where they were going and started asking whether he thought the Northfield would take sweet corn. Months later, on a warm evening with the rebuilt house painted cream, Ada set Mrs. Keene's silver thimble on the baby's finger and laughed when he tried to eat it. Wyatt sat on the top step mending a harness while Thomas argued with Benji over whether a wagon could be painted blue. June chased the chicken through the meadow. Mary Ellen rang the supper bell. Ada came to the porch rail and rested one hand on Wyatt's shoulder like it had always belonged there. Funny thing about homes, he thought. Sometimes they aren't built where you first lost everything. Sometimes they're built where you finally stop leaving before the light is lit. The meadow lay gold around them, and the bigger wagon rested under the cottonwood with the children's names painted bright along its side. Next time, we'll tell the story of a deaf woman sent to a mountain ranch because her family was ashamed of her, and the scarred horse breaker who understood her silence before he ever heard her laugh.